So let's get things underway right away with a very special guest that I believe Alex is going to introduce for us.
Yes, today's guest is an automotive commission artist whose work has been seen in Hemmings Motor News, Hemmings Muscle Machines, Garage Style magazine, and now graces the cover on a very special magazine, which he will be telling us all about. His work has been in the ACA Museum, the Elegance at Hershey, and he has even been the master of ceremonies at the second annual Cigar City Concours d'Elegance in Tampa, Florida. I welcome Mr. Joe Pep to the show. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning,
Joe Pep.
everybody.
Welcome, Joe Pep.
Good morning.
Great to see you.
Yeah. So
All I have to say is, kids, draw on those kitchen walls. You never know where it can
Go ahead and draw.
Oh man.
Especially
Joe,
Archie comics.
Yeah, Joe is an awesome guy. Hey, Joe, when did you first get into classic cars?
Well, my grandfather worked for International Motor Car Company, which later became Mack Truck. And he always told me about his friends that have old cars. We would go for rides. He'd say, "Hey, Peppy, look, there's trolley car tracks." Or we'd stop off at a friend's house he hadn't seen in years, and they'd go and open up the old garage, and it'd have like an old Studebaker or an old Chevy under a tarp. But where I really got into it was in 1959. I was 5, and that's when Elliot Ness and the Untouchables came out.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing these my grandfather used to call them old time cars. Back then there was no car shows or classic cars. And my grandfather says, "This show has all these old time cars." And you got to figure in 1959, the cars that they were showing had to be 25 years old. And that's where I really fell in love with it. In 1965, Dad had taken me to the New York World's Fair. And that's where I first saw a concept car.
Mm-hmm.
I was blown away. I was just blown away. And my dad, he was always one for saying, he says, "Pep, one day you may be driving something like that." So, for a 10-year-old kid, that was like, wow, this is fantastic. And that's how my passion for automobiles started.
Yeah. I remember the World's Fair too. I remember just being awestruck at everything. It's funny what sticks in your mind, right?
Bigger than life. Bigger than life.
And that was my own neighborhood. It was in Whitestone at the time. Your first art job, I should say, was in advertising. Is that correct?
Right. Around a total of 45 years in advertising and publishing. I worked for one of the top 5 typography shops in Manhattan. So I got to meet all these famous graphic designers that used our service. One man, which probably nobody knows in the automotive world, his name's Paul Rand. He designed the IBM logo, UPS, TWA, and I had the honor of working with him. And I always thought, it's like, wow, here's a kid with a 2-year county college degree, and I'm working with like one of the all-time greats. But it was like a wonderful education, which I use to this day when I do event posters. It's like the type has to go with the poster for that time period. I got to tell you about the hat. I was tired of going to car shows. And when I lived in Connecticut, we had the Fairfield County Concours d'Elegance, which was in Westport, Connecticut, and the Greenwich Concours. And I was tired of going to car shows and getting burnt ears and a burnt nose. And I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he says, "Well, there's this great hat shop up in New Haven, Connecticut called Delmonico's." And so in the spring of 2009, got one, and then I get a call from Mark McCourt from Hemmings, and he says that Richard Lenateno and myself, we would love to have you in our magazine. So this hat's become like a trademark. So people say, when I go to a car show, I'll look for the hat. So I'm easy to spot. So now I have this hat, and it's been with me. This is my second one. The first one lasted 10 years. So Robert, this quality haberdashery.
Love it.
And it's stuck with me. So I always wear the hat.
You mentioned Hemmings and Richard Lentinello. When did you first get your first break with doing automobile art? I think that was with them guys, right?
Right. Well, I started off, okay, so I'm working in advertising, and I'm working as an art director at Archie Comics. So all my art is done in Adobe Illustrator. Now, I'm a digital artist. Never really had time to take classes because it was earning a living, and never had time to, oil paint or watercolor. And then, you have babies coming back in the 90s. So it's like, well, that's impossible. And so I always stuck with it. But Richard Lentinello gave me a break in the October issue of Hemmings Classic Car. And then that was featured in a blog. And over the years, I've been mentioned and my artwork shown around 10 times in Hemmings. And that helped out a lot. That helped out a lot. It's, it's, if you want something, you got to fight for it. You got to, you got to constantly work at it. And Hemmings got the ball rolling. My friends over at the AAC Museum in Hershey featured my art. And you have a lot of kids out there that when I was at Hershey and it was an open, it was for the Hershey Fall Meet. A lot of families bring kids, and the mom and dad's asking me about, how do you draw? How do you do this? Is this a painting or what? And you want to inspire kids because you know what? Not every dad is a mechanic. Not every mom is a mechanic. But they have this passion for automobiles. So why not encourage, And I always look at my art as the art of the automobile. I remember years ago, I was at a car show. I think it was like a 40 Lincoln that had all this chrome on it. Mm-hmm. And I like to get in tight with an automobile, a close-up, because that's where you see the true art of the car designer. Mm-hmm. And so, like, say, with the Cadillac here and the Cadillac fin, I'll get up close and things that you really don't look for. So I had this beautiful photograph I had taken, and my wife says, "You can't use that photo." And I says, "Well, why not?" She says, "Look in the chrome." And in the chrome, here's some guy scratching his butt. And I'm like,
that's a typical car show. Yeah, I mean that would be real,
right? But you learn so much. You go to a car show, and I love the history of the car. No matter what year. I always tell people, I go, take a kid to a car show. It's an outdoor history lesson on four wheels. Mm-hmm. It's you stand by a car and it was made, like, say, the Model T here. This was the last model year for the Model T at 27. I says, you're looking at the top of technology for that time period, what was popular in color, style, technology. And then you see this light bulb going off. And I think if you make more people aware of it, mm-hmm. it makes more people interested in the hobby,
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's, we all know, it's like if you see a GTO, it's like, oh God, I was 13 years old. And these cars were like, wow, this is really great. And it's funny how now the younger generation loves the retro cars, but the problem now is you can't touch them because they're so expensive.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're a guy that you could draw all kinds of things, but what is it about illustrating cars that you love so much? What is it about cars that does it for you?
You know, if I think this hits home right with Richard's last issue of Crankshaft. It was a 1960 Polaris Matador.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going on 67. And when that car came out, I remember these cars as a big old boat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember seeing them, but you really never paid attention to them. And by the time I was in high school, these cars were like double parked and they were getting ready to get towed. And they've seen their better days. Mm-hmm. But drawing this automobile that I really never paid attention to, and then I'm discovering all the design from the automotive designer, and the tail fin on this car, and it's so long with the tail lights. It almost looks like a rocket, you mm-hmm. know. And you discover all these little nuances that the designer put in, and it has to be captured just right so that you, the viewer, you look at that and you'll say, that's a nice looking car, you know, hey, that's nice. But you hit the mark right on the spot because they see that as an old car that they recognize. When someone comes up to you and say, you know, what the heck is that? You know, you missed your mark. So right. I was raised, and then of course working in advertising, it's like do the job right the first time so you don't have to go back and redo it again, you know. But then when you work in advertising, the client will say, I love it, but my thought is there's no buts. You love it. It's sold. Go away.
That's it.
Perfect. Let's do one more.
Yeah, let's do one. Yeah, let's do one more. Sure, the meter's running. No problem.
It's perfect. Let's do one more.
Let's do one more.
Yeah, you know, it's funny when I was at the Saratoga meet, we were judging, and I'm in with my group, my team, and we're adding up the scores, and I look up, and between all the cars is that car, the one that you did the artwork from, at the same angle. At the same angle, parked at the same angle. It just hit me like all of a sudden, like, whoa, there it is. There's the magazine cover. And it was just funny how it just right in the middle of doing that. Just so now I said, great. Now I got to go look at it. Really good.
You do a double take.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I have a very short story about Crankshaft issue number 1 with the Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So owned by Mr. Howard Kroplik. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I, when we started dating, our first movie was A Man in His Dream, and it was about the Tucker. And that has always followed me. And in 2014, I donated a metal cabinet with artwork, and I got permission. I contacted my friend Rob Ida, and he'll build you a Tucker, a brand new 1948 Tucker, if you want it as a race car, or if you want it as your everyday car, if you wanted to. Just bring money. So I told him, I says, I want to design this cabinet that looks like it was at the Tucker dealership in their garage. And with that, he says, sure. It's like, it's always good to get permission, and then you're good to go. So we did this cabinet, and I go to all the logos. I had to re-illustrate all the logos to this cabinet. And so this is where your graphic design experience comes in, because I could recreate something that hasn't been in print in over what, 70 some odd years. And at this time, I can't remember what it sold for, but 100% of the proceeds went to the museum. Because to me, it's, if you don't have your museums, then the future generations cannot learn. And, it's, I mean, if I walk down the street here, I think the oldest car I would see is my beater car, a 2005 rare Toyota Corolla. But it gives, to me, it's like with the pandemic winding down, it's to me, family and kids, it's anything to get them together. Now, gentlemen, I got a question for you. Did your parents take you, say, to the Bronx Zoo or down to Manhattan or Sunday trips? It's important to do this stuff because now the kids could be locked away in their room and you won't even see them for the entire weekend, So, it's like bring them to a car show, bring them to a concourse event. It's fun to get dressed up at a concourse event,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I can wear shorts.
And a hat.
And a hat.
And
And a hat.
Got to have the trademark.
I mean, I think cars are a great way to make new friends. I mean, it's kind of a truism in life that as you get older, you're exposed to fewer new things, and it's kind of harder to meet new friends. I mean, most of the friends you meet are when you're in school or when you're in your early 20s or something like that. And yeah, you meet couples and stuff, but when you're in something like the car hobby, I find anyway, it's so much easier to meet new friends that way because you have a shared interest. And there's also a destination involved, whether it's a show or you're going to a Cars and Coffee, or you're just taking a ride with the guys and you park someplace and you're hanging out. I mean, this is the way we forge relationships, right? And I think that, Joe, to your point before, what's so important about taking kids out to car shows or whatever is that it puts you in a social situation. You're not texting somebody, you're not building a relationship with your thumbs. You're building a relationship face to face. And those kind of experiences are becoming rarer and rarer, and if you can do that in the company of beautiful design and, the great smells and sounds of cars, I defy you to not like going to a car show on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning. And the thing that's great about those shows too, is that they're usually in the morning. So it's 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. You show up, you have a coffee, you walk around for a couple hours. It's now just 10 o'clock. You have the whole rest of the day. Yeah. And you've already done something amazing with your day before the day even really began.
And so what do we keep saying here? You meet the nicest people at car shows.
Yep. Yeah. And if you have car trouble, people will bend over backwards to get you back on the road, jump your car. I've seen that many, many times.
Oh yeah, I mean we're all helping each other. Mike is known for doing that. If you happen to know Mike and have his phone, he just comes. He calls himself quadruple A.
Yeah, we're one better than triple A.
One better than triple A. He shows up with his tool chest, kind of like Harvey Keitel as the cleaner.
What is quadruple A? It's always available automotive assistance. Right. Any of my friends qualify for quadruple A.
Quadruple A. Okay. Well, you can become a friend of the Auto Lab radio show here by liking us on Facebook, right where you see us. If you have a question about cars or you just want to say something about the automotive culture or whatever, please put it in the chat. Or you could maybe even call us. You can be on our show next week.
You can call us
let
right
us know
here
that you want to do that.
516-488-3225. It's right here. Call me and we'll get you on the air.
And Mike will help change your tire. Yeah.
That's it.
So, right. So just make sure you friend us here on Facebook and keep track of the Auto Lab. So Joe, a question for you about going from, I mean, you were an illustrator for Archie Comics.
Right.
Which
Art
is-
director, illustrator. Yep.
Right. Art director and illustrator. Tell me a little bit about how the comic world and the car world may overlap, because I see that there are some similarities in terms of the fan base, you know?
Well, when Mark McCourt was interviewing me back in 2009, we were just talking on the side, and I said, Mark, I go, the comic book industry will put in automobiles to get that draw for girls and boys. And Mark, in September 2009, I appear again, but now in a Hemmings Daily blog, and it was called Archie's Cool Cars. And so with the permission of the publishers, I got covers of, there's a Stingray, there's one with an Avanti. Alex, I'm sorry, I don't know if I sent you the link or whatever, but
I'm gonna see if I can find it right now. Archie's Cool Cars is the name of it.
Archie's Cool Cars, yep, by Mark McCourt. And there's an Avanti. There's Archie he's got like a record player in the car and a movie projector, and Mark did a wonderful little editorial on that. And again, I was taken by surprise. I think the best surprises are the ones that come out of left field. You're not waiting for it; it just taps you on the shoulder and says, "Here I am." But the comic book industry, they have a gigantic Comic-Con in Manhattan at the Jacob Javits Center. And I went to from 05 to 09 when I retired in 2010. But it's the kids, they get interested in this. And it's like, how many times it's like someone's come up to you and it looks like a shoe with wheels. Fantastic. The kids are taking it from their imagination. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
there was, I saw the
Archie's
Avanti
Jalopy.
down there.
Veronica had a 53 Corvette. Stingray.
There's the Avanti.
This is the Avanti. Reggie.
Yeah.
Everybody hated Reggie. I had a good
Well,
conversation with Reggie. He's got this thing where everybody hates him.
Do you think that's just because of his personality or the way he's drawn?
Reggie was he was the lovable bad kid. He always had the hots for Betty and Veronica, anything to upset the balance of Archie.
Right.
But Archie, one of the great things about this is that when I started working with Archie Comics in 1989, cool. I got to meet the all-time greats of the golden era. They were kids when they started with Archie during World War II. And this one artist, Ed White, he said, I was on the corner in Manhattan when Archie Comics was located in New York. I was waiting for a city bus and I was sketching. And he didn't know that he was in front of the Archie Comics offices. So one of the guys from Archie was running down to get coffee and he sees this kid drawing. He says, "Say, kid, can you draw Archie?" And he says, "Sure." He says, "Come with me." Went up to the offices, he drew, and he was hired on the spot. No college education or anything.
Talk about right place, right time.
Yeah.
Can you draw Archie?
I got
That can be weird like that.
Yeah, nowadays it's like, you got to know graphic design, you got to know illustration. In New Jersey, for cartoon art, you got the Joe Kubert School of Cartooning, and this is where a lot of good artists come out of. And to me, it's one of these things where you always have to encourage kids. They're the future.
Without a doubt.
And I says you could pursue illustrating as a hobby, or you can do it as a something just to relieve stress. Bad day at work,
Yeah.
have a cocktail, start drawing. You know, but
Yeah.
getting back to the car shows, it's I always felt Wayne Carini is the godfather of cars and coffee. Uh, his shop was the F40 garage was just like a half hour away. So I used to go to it when Wayne Carini was, you didn't have an audience with the Pope,
When he didn't have gray hair.
when he didn't, yeah. But to me, he, always a gentleman, a scholar, always taking time out. And that's what it is. It's like if someone's asking you something about a car, you got to tell them the story, a light story. Then if they
Yeah.
want to get into details, I used to do this when I had my radio show. Every car has a story. I used to do these live behind the scenes of Every Car Has a Story, and I would interview people, and I would say, "Well, tell me about your car." I met this one little boy. His father owned a '54 Cadillac. This kid knew who the president was at that time, who made the car, and I'm like, I was stunned. I was really, really stunned.
How old was the kid?
I'd say he was 50. No, I'd say he was around. I would say he was around 12 years old. And he,
it's with Wayne. I've seen him in action. A little bit before. I guess right when his show was starting, so he wasn't such an icon. And I saw him at car shows and and spending time with people. But even after the show was super popular, always had time. I mean, I remember I took my son to a car show. Yeah, I think it might have been the Greenwich Concours. And he was there, and my son was like 9, and he took the time to really talk with him about cars. My son's really into it, knows like every Ferrari and whatever. And then after we were finished, he said to me, if we don't, I said, thank you so much for spending some time with my son. He said, if we don't get the next generation interested in this, it will die.
Absolutely.
So he really sees it as a mission to do that. And I even find I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ian Carr, shameless plug with a K. And where I'm building mostly Porsche 914s. I do some work on Ferrari 308s and Mustang 65 Mustang that I have. But it's a lot of how-to, just because I believe that wrenching is therapy, and I want to share the joy of it. And a lot of people are intimidated by it. But anyway, so in doing that, I get so many questions, messages, just people, interested, and I make sure that I take the time to answer every single one of those comments, because you never know what that one connection that you make, that one seed that you plant becomes a giant oak tree. It fosters a huge interest. I mean, I had a mechanic when I started wrenching, and I kind of came to it late in life. I was probably in my early 40s, and I was just doing a little bit of work on the 65 Mustang that I got as a father-son project,
nice.
just to do something with my son. And I remember at the beginning I said, I'm never gonna touch anything that could strand me or hurt me. So it was only cosmetic stuff that I started doing. But then, you kind of get into it and you're like, let me just try this a little. Let me work on the steering. Let me work on the brakes. And there was a mechanic that I would take it to nearby, who is kind of like my guru, just like the professor, to check my work, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do anything that would hurt anybody. And he talked about planting seeds. He just kept telling me, you can do it. Just take your time and read up on it. And he was very encouraging. And sometimes he would send me away, when I would bring him work to do on my regular car. He's like, you can do this. I'm not doing it. You do it.
Absolutely.
And just doing that, just those little encouragements. I mean, now I just finished rebuilding a car from scratch, nut and bolt. Like there was nothing on this car and in the engine. And I don't want to blow the suspense because next week I'm gonna have a special video for you guys. But
Cool.
But it's amazing how a little bit of encouragement and a little bit of time that you spend with people face to face, which is the key, can really, alter the course of people's lives and interests and everything else. So I know it's a long-winded way of me getting around to it, but just because I think anybody who's watching us right now or listening to what we're saying, it's just such a great opportunity, and I just hope everybody takes it.
Ian, what you just said and the story you related about Wayne Carini and your son, more illustration of how car people are the nicest, friendliest, most social people in the world. And everybody should go to a car show if you want to meet those kind of people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Before the pandemic, very active with the AACA Cape Fear chapter here in Wilmington. And I would be like the pitch man, like the barker. And a good friend of mine, I call Hambone, Michael Hamby. And he has several Model T Fords, Model A, beautiful cars. And I was getting people, I go, hey, you want to see how you would start a 1923 Model T? And you'd be surprised. And I would get a crowd.
Yep.
And then my friend Hambone would come and he would start it up. And then he would give a tour of the car after it was running, and then he shut it off. And people were like surprised. I go, can you imagine? It's a rainy Saturday night and the wind's blowing sideways and the rain's coming down and you got to crank this car because you got to get somewhere. Now it's like you get in the car and you go.
What life must have been like back then. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't know any better. That was the top of technology. I mean, you figure 23 years before 1923, you would get into a horse and a carriage,
Yeah.
Away we go. Chip, chip. Go
Joe,
see.
I have a mission.
Joe, I have a mission. Robert out.
Well, I was just going to add.
What's your mission?
The horse and cart had to have its oats, didn't it? The horse had to be filled up with oats.
Yes.
And then you had to clean up after it.
And then you had to make sure that the horse's shoes hadn't thrown themselves off.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
Early maintenance.
Early maintenance.
Early emissions.
What do you want to say, Mike?
Yeah, I have an assignment for Joe. Joe, if you're up for it, we're talking here about getting younger generations interested in the car culture, car business,
yes,
right?
Yes. Sir.
I teach automotive at the City University here in New York, and one of my missions is getting young people into the trades, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with your background in advertising and cars, what we need is a recruiting poster, like the World War II and I recruiting posters for the military. Like the most famous one that comes to mind is Uncle Sam Wants You, right?
Right.
So something like this car wants you or this car needs you.
We need you to wrench.
Oh, what was that, Robert?
We need you to wrench right across the front at an angle.
Well, that would be interesting. If
I could draw.
Feels like doing that. Yeah, I think I put my money on you for doing that. Yeah,
I'll do it. Let's
recruiting poster for technicians.
Yeah. One of the things I was very surprised with when I was doing Every Car Has a Story, we were on the air for 81 shows, met a lot of fantastic people, and I had a really, and we're good friends to this day, a young lady named Kayla Rain Dancer out in Montana, car girl, okay, works for a living as a nanny, and she owns a 62 Ford Thunderbird convertible. just put in the hydraulics for the convertible top to come up. She owns a 68 Mustang that her grandfather left her. Beautiful car, and that's getting a new engine put in. A 60, I think it's a 68 Pontiac Tempest, copper with a black vinyl roof. And then she's got 14
Nice.
cars on her property that she's the type of woman where, like, if you see a box of puppies on the road, she'll take them in. So she sees an old car and it's like, oh, I got to restore that. I says, Kayla, you got a lifetime. But the thing is, there's so many talented women out there that want to get their hands dirty. Now, like say with Kayla's situation, it's money's tight, you know, and to go to school, it's either school or no work, or work and no school, you know. And I think we got to get those people into classrooms like Mike, so it's affordable for them, you know.
People with that passion.
Yes, and I mean, it's. I'll ask her. Like last week, I said, "So how was your weekend?" She says, "Well, I was working on Miss Daisy." Now, Miss Daisy is her '62 Thunderbird that she found, and it had 5,000 miles on it, and it was just a couple miles down the road in Montana. And it's a beautiful find. It's a beautiful car. To me, it's retro design at its peak, because, you know, 10 years later in '72, all those designs with the big fins, that was all gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so to me, it's like women play an important part. I met a really wonderful woman. Name was Joanne Creamer, and she worked for General Motors.
Yeah.
And she started what she told me, and correct me if I'm wrong, she told me that she started designing the interior of trunks, but it was a man's world back then. So the men got all the good jobs, and they gave the women, well, women know how to pick out curtains, so they know how to pick out an interior for a trunk.
Yeah.
But she
Joan's been on with us.
What's that?
Joan has been on with us. She's really something.
Yeah.
Oh, she's wonderful. She's wonderful.
She's a nice, wonderful lady.
And
Joe, what do you think? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Ian.
I was just going to ask you, what do you think is the best era for automotive design? Like, if you were going to pick a decade.
Jeez. You know, that's like saying, who's your favorite? You know, is it your son or your daughter? You know.
Well, it's a Sophie's choice, right? Well, we've talked about on the show a lot of times that and at least this is my opinion also, anything post 1985 pretty much doesn't really register with me, mostly because you know the aerodynamics and the fuel economy issues have, you know, kind of forced engineering to follow the function, force the form to follow the function. But like for me personally, I think the era between 1965 and 1975 had such a great range of designs. You know, if you look at like 70 to 80, you have things like the Mustang 2, you know, which is not great. But you also look at like the early eras, like the 40s to 1940 to 50, you know, and you have some of those great Packards. And
okay, I have Ian, I got a question for you.
Go
What
ahead.
was your first car when you were, you know, getting your driver's license, high school?
God, you're not going to believe this, but it was a Fiat X19.
Oh God.
my dad, you know what? I have to say, got to give it to my dad. So he was definitely a car guy. And he wanted me to have like a sporty car, right? And so he found this Fiat X19 used. It was a 77. It was 1981 when I got my 1980 when I got my license. And he found this used car, lightly used, and got it for me. And oh my God, it was mechanically terrible. And worst of all, for a 16-year-old boy, it didn't have a back seat. So it was very difficult to do anything else in the car besides drive it. But it did, the sportiness of it was really fun. But why do you ask?
It's to me, it's, as soon as I asked you, I had this big smile. Now, the next question, same question for Mike. What was your first car?
I still have my first car, 1962 Pontiac Grand Prix.
What a-
Wow.
The best
I
year
didn't
ever
know
for
that,
Grand
Mike.
Prix, the first year and the best year.
Wow. Alex,
Wow.
how about you? was your-
Mine was my first car because I'm an artist and I have to be so different, was a 1963 Studebaker Lark two-door. My friends had Trans Ams and I had a Studebaker. I mean, you can't get much more weirder than that. So
I sent
Wow.
away, remember Alphabet cereal
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Post? On the
Yep,
back of the
Alphabets.
box, you could send
Mhm.
away for a Lark. It was a convertible model.
oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
Got it. The wheels were plastic. They weren't like the real rubber. And that Robert,
Well,
what was your first car?
well, here in jolly old Britain, I was an impoverished art student. So I'm an artist sculptor. And my first car was a 1960 Morris Minor, which I know that you had in the States for a short while. Mine was different because it had what was called semaphore indicators.
Mhm,
These were the little arms that used to flick out.
mhm.
If I went over a bad bump in the road, both of the indicator arms would come out at the same time.
Wow.
And I had that car for 14 years and I sold it.
Wow.
He may be listening, to the vice president of the Irving Trust Bank Corporation of America. He bought this car from me. And as it went down the road, I cried because I
Oh.
really didn't want to change the car.
Yeah.
See,
That was my first car.
that's a question Mark Green would ask you. It's like, is there ever a car that got away? And
That's the
what you
one.
have to say.
That's one. Can I
We all
just
have one.
can I just quickly add, very, very quickly? Joe is making some really interesting points here. If you ask anybody about any event or time in their family, and you say, "What car did your family first have?" the doors open, and all the family history comes out, and it's all focused around the car. Where it took them, when it broke down, what happened to it, what they did with it. So the car is a social cement. It's the social cement
I agree.
of
And
our
you know
world.
what's
It's
interesting?
very important.
And you rarely have pictures of them.
Yeah, very few.
I was going back to make a list of all the cars that I've owned, and I don't have pictures of every car I've owned. I don't even think I have a picture of the Fiat. Now, some of it was, in those days, you had film and camera and, processing and whatever. But, the pictures that I have, even of recent ones, are incidental. It's a picture of my house and the car happened to be in the driveway, or a picture of my daughter and the car is in the background. So I'm starting a new thing where I'm taking a picture of every car, like on the day that I get it. So
I doubt I have a picture of my X19. I also had one, but there is a yes.
What year?
I don't
chiseled
remember.
in stone,
But I
like
had
or a
it-
cave drawing.
I had it right after I got out of the army, so it's like 50 years ago. But I have to tell you that the first pictures of me and cars is I'm 5 years old in my father's shop working on our 1950 Pontiac that my father bought as a total loss. All our family cars were total losses when we bought them. And that's the first picture of me working on cars at 5 years old.
Wow. Ian,
Yeah.
I have to ask you a favor. I had sent
Yeah.
Alex, it's a newspaper ad for a Moon automobile.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I sent that one. I wasn't sure if that was. Yeah.
But
I know.
you know what I
that they
have?
can talk about it.
I do have, though. I have this image, though, Joe. So tell me about this.
Okay. That
Talk about first
So-
cars, right?
my dad was a mailman. All right. And I can remember to this day going to the Pontiac dealership. And, as a kid, it's like you remember, but you don't remember vividly. But I remember going to the Pontiac dealership. He had just bought his brand new 1959 Pontiac Catalina. And it came with a radio and a
Mhm.
heater. And that car
Mm.
cost $1,975. Now,
Wow.
the little boy is me, and I'm wearing a Mickey Mantle t-shirt, which is probably worth like $100,000, and a Marlon Brando motorcycle hat, right?
Right.
So
Even then, you were wearing a hat.
even then, and I got a good crop of hair, you know.
Yeah,
So
good. So you're not hiding anything.
now you got to ask me, why do I have a sour puss on my face? There's a story,
Ah,
Okay.
okay?
Is it
So-
is it
Because your
the
father
hood
wouldn't let you
ornament
drive
is-
it?
Mike, was Alex talking to you about this?
No.
No, no. The reason why is those cars, as you can remember, always ran hot. Dad puts me on the hood of the car after he had just drove around. And all I can remember is the back of my legs were burning up from the hood and my hands.
Oh
So my
man.
father would say, "Come here, Peppy. I'm going to put you on the hood of the car. Let me get my Polaroid and snap the picture." And it's like,
Oh my gosh.
for a
Call
5-year-old
child
kid.
services.
So yeah, they weren't invented yet. But I got to tell you about this moon dealership.
Yeah.
I was doing research on my old hometown newspaper, and the archives go from 1838 to 1930. So I put in my grandfather's name, and I knew he was in real estate, and I knew he lost everything during the crash of 29. And then I'm seeing these other things, and it's saying Pepitone Brothers. I'm like, what's this? I open it up. My grandfather and his brother owned a moon dealership in Highland Park, New Jersey in 1919.
Wow.
Never heard about it. Never heard about it from my father. My father was always one for telling me about family history, you know, when grandpa came over from Sicily in 1888, so forth, so
Mhm.
on. And I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great somewhere where he kept one car and with a note saying, "To the future, enjoy." But they didn't think like that. It's like when things were old back then and they've seen their better times, they threw it out.
Yeah, just get it's the same today. You got to wonder what's going to happen, as we move forward. Hey Joe, tell everybody where they can find out more about your work and maybe
Sure. They
download
can find
stuff
out
or
more
if there's
about
swag or
my work.
books.
It's people that contact me. I've
Mhm.
built up a reputation where it's word of mouth. I don't
Mhm.
have a website, but I am on Instagram.
Okay.
I was on Facebook. My account got hacked with 5,000 people.
Oh
So
man.
Facebook decided to lock me out. It's been
Love
30 days. And, it's like you're trying to get in, and Facebook is like, they're
Mhm.
nowhere to be found. So right now I'm in limbo. But if you want to get a hold of me through Alex, or go on Instagram, and every car has a story. Joe Pep. I have an icon, looks like a Pepsi bottle cap, and
Mhm.
I'll be more than happy to return your message.
Hey, Joe, what was your first driving experience? How old were you?
13. Right next to New Brunswick was a small farm community, which is now all corporate and it's all built up. It's called Camp Kilmer. Now, during World War II, if you went to Kilmer, you were going over to Europe. Well, by 1959, they closed the military base. By 1967, I was 13. Dad would take me out there in his brand new 1966 Mercury Monterey, which was later my first car. And it was like driving in a ghost town. You had stop signs. You can go by the PX. You can go by the barracks. And this is where it taught me how to drive. And I always remember saying to my father, "I'll never go over 25 miles an hour." But now Dad, he had a part-time job
ahead,
as
Alex.
a mailman, and he drove a bus. And I've driven old the old GM buses that look like a loaf of bread.
Uh-huh.
The one like Ralph Cramden would drive. Okay.
Mhm.
And you're driving. I mean, you're a kid, and you're driving this big old bus down the street, a side street. But nowadays, social services would come after you, But we were able to do things back then, and nobody got killed. No one's eye got poked out or anything like that.
Yeah.
Metal
It-
dashboards and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Joe, were you going to be at any car shows in the New York, New Jersey area in the near future?
As of right now, no. As of right now, no. I'm still no, fully vaccinated, but I'm still a little leery on things. I miss going to the Greenwich Concourse.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful experience. And what I always enjoyed about that is that you would get these people from Manhattan, and they're dressed to the nines, And I always thought that was nice, because when you go to a regular car show, everybody's dressed T-shirts, like maybe a sports shirt and stuff like that. But when you go to a concourse, it's like you got to get dressed up, because it's that type of event. And so this one guy said, "I don't like getting dressed up." I said, "Well," I go, "it's up to you, But
Yeah.
the like today is our Cars and Coffee, but it's just way too hot out there for me.
Yeah.
I'd rather go to a nighttime car show. But to answer your question, Mike, right now, homeward bound in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Alex, what do you want to say?
I just wanted to congratulate you on Crankshaft issue number 1 cover and Crankshaft number 2 issue cover. I mean, that's really something. I spotted it immediately. I knew it was your artwork as soon as I saw it. It's a big deal to get a cover magazine like that. I'm sure you must be very proud of it.
Well, can I tell everybody the story, how this all transpired?
Sure.
Okay. Richard Lanatano gave me my break in 2009. And over the years, we've always been in contact with one another. When Richard reached out to me in November of last year, and he asked me to do the cover. So working in publishing, I know the monumental costs he's going through, Now, I do advertising art, an agency up in New York called McKenzie and Company. It's not the glamorous, but you know what? It's like I can work at home 5 days a week. I could work 7 days a week if I wanted to, but Mrs. Pep won't let me do that. And then I have automotive commission art. So the way I was brought up, old school Italian, you have a friend that needs help, give it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I did issue number 1 and number 2 free of charge because I want him to succeed. It's a beautiful
That's
publication.
nice.
There's a lot of hard work that goes into these. And by Richard not paying me, maybe he could put that money into other areas that can help the magazine.
Yep.
Everybody's had a dream, and he has a dream of putting together this beautiful publication. The layout is fantastic. The editorials are really great. And to me, it's more of a coffee table book than like a magazine.
It is really good.
So, it's like as an illustrator, I'm not going out buying lumber. I'm not going out buying paint. Everything's in my head, and it just gets transferred from the brain to the hand. And what I do is I block out time. It's like, okay, well, I'll work on the paid project first, and then I'll work on Richard's. Now, issue number 2, he needed it really quick. And I did that in a week's time. I'd say probably around 25 hours on
Wow.
that. But to
And
me,
where can they get
it-
crankshaft?
yeah, to me,
Where-
it's even though it's digital art, you still have to draw it. You have to make the chrome look like chrome,
Mm,
you know. And where I learned all these tips and tricks is like I'm self-taught, but I always liked the General Motors illustrators. So if
mhm.
I get stuck on something, I'll go back and reference and say, well, how did they do that headlight, or how did they do the chrome on that bumper? You know, because chrome, it's an optical illusion of the reflection that
Yeah.
is in back of you.
Yeah.
But you got to make it believable. And I'm not one for using filters where it's like you have like the
Mhm.
sky gradated. You know, it's
Mhm.
I make it so again it's believable. But getting back to Crankshaft and Richard Lenateno, it was like I donated the first two covers so that he can make something of this magazine. And I think it's very
how
important
can-
to have it, you know.
How can people find it? How can people get it, subscribe, whatever?
Well, they do. Crankshaft does have
Website.
they have blowing cards. Let's see if I can get one here. Here we go. Blowing cards. They do have a website, Crankshaft.
Is
And I'm
it
sorry, I don't have that
crankshaft.com or?
information
It's
handy.
You know what?
Lentinello.
We'll find it and put it in our Facebook stream.
Great. It's at lentinellopublishing.com.
Lentinella Publishing. Well, Joe,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing so many of your great stories and your illustrations and your perspective on the car world. I hope you'll stick around, and we've got lots more Auto Lab to come. But you're a fantastic.
I would be honored. I would be
And-
honored.